In past videos on the Cenobites, we mostly talk about one in particular, Pinhead. And for good reason, he's iconic. So today, let's shift gears and talk about the Cenobite with the award-winning smile, Chatterer. Let's get to it, shall we?
Such a shame.
Hello guys, and welcome back to yet another video. Most of the monsters we watch on TV and in cinemas are scary. Not just because of a few changes here and there, but because they look completely inhuman. Chatterer, on the other hand, is scary for the completely opposite reason. You see, Chatterer is such a character who is not only unique in the way he looks, but he's also unique in the way he's portrayed. And if you don't cry after hearing what his potential backstory is, well, I'm sure you'll tear up after hearing why he is what he is now. I highly recommend you watch our last video on the Cenobites and the Lament Configuration, because it'll make things much clearer much more quickly, as in today's video, we'll be dissecting the cursed anatomy of Chatterer and figure out why he chatters, what happened to his face, and many other things, including the most important part, why he remains one of Hellraiser's most disturbing creations. What exactly is Chatterer, and why is he so different from other Cenobites? I know many of you might have missed our previous video on Cenobites, or you guys may have simply forgotten, so allow me to refresh things for you. Contrary to many beliefs, Cenobites are not really zombies, vampires, monsters, or even simply dead humans with mutilated faces. In reality, according to the Hellraiser mythology, Cenobites are actually humans who have been transformed into extra-dimensional beings who are directly related to the Lament Configuration, the Labyrinth, or even the Leviathan itself. At least, in one way or another. When these humans are tested and judged by the Leviathan itself, they are put through a test, and if they are deemed suitable, the entire body of that person is remade, and their flesh, scars, clothing, wounds, and even their tools all become part of a new identity that is fully built around extreme sensation. In Hellbound Hellraiser 2, the Cenobites are clearly shown to have once been human before they were brutally transformed into servants of Leviathan. Later on, as the story goes on, and the franchise lore expands on this process with transformation machinery and altered blood, that detail doesn't need much attention here. The matter that is the most important part of this entire conversation is the fact that Chatterer's mutilation is in no way just random, or even just for decorative purposes. Every other Cenobite that exists has a scar or a past wound that hints directly at a theme, and as we all can see, Chatterer's theme is mainly aimed at destroying normal facial expression and turning speech into suffering. Before we go deeper in the video, I thought it was kind of important for you to know that his design was no accident. Whatever he is now happened because the Labyrinth decided to take exactly that from him. Why does Chatterer's face feel so wrong to look at? If you're a fan of horror movies, then you'll probably find his face design really well done. But if you are terrified of horror movies, his design is probably the most disturbing one you have seen in a while, and it's actually tied to the human psyche. You see, humans tend to instinctively look at faces because faces allow a person to read safety, emotion, fear, intent, and identity, and all of it happens on its own. Chatterer also has a face that is the same shape as a human head, but almost every signal, every part of the face that the human mind tries to read, is broken down to such an extent that his face confuses our brain even more. His eyes are hidden behind scarred flesh, so there is literally no way for us to read where or what he's looking at. His mouth tries to resemble a grin, but if you look closely, you'll realize that it's unmistakably an injury rather than an expression. Even his freaking exposed teeth make him look aggressive, even when he's standing perfectly still. Every single aspect of a fact that allows a human to be expressive is there, yet so tainted that it would be better if it weren't. That is why this little gap between the looks human and gives us nothing human back is exactly where his true horror lies. I'm sure you guys are aware of a famous character from this franchise called Pinhead. Well, comparing him with Chatterer might be the best idea here because Pinhead's face looks really controlled, ordered, almost ceremonial, like a priest who chose his suffering deliberately. Whereas Chatterer's face looks more damaged and feels a bit more personal. If you look at Chatterer, you can tell that he did not willingly participate in a ritual. He looks more like a victim of a ritual that just happened to him, and that distinction is part of what makes him so hard to look away from. What happened to Chatterer's mouth? Throughout the years, every character's design has changed a bit, but fundamentally, their core idea has mostly remained the same, and for Chatterer, it's no different. In the 1987 version, Chatterer's lips are drawn back, and his mouth is held open by numerous hooks that are designed to pull into the damaged flesh toward the back of his head. Also, all of his teeth are permanently exposed, which makes his mouth look far less like a human feature and much more like an open wound. This design was made for two reasons. One, it looks terrifying and makes the horror work. And secondly, lips are fundamentally protectors of our teeth. They are responsible for shaping speech, help us eat, and they even have a major impact on a person's expressions. Chatterer, unfortunately, does not possess the ability to do these things because his teeth are, by far, the most exposed part of his face. And just by looking at him, it's clear that he cannot relax his lips, smile naturally, or even hide any type of discomfort, even if he wanted to. Of course, I can't openly claim that he's unable to eat or swallow food, or anything to be honest, because having a mouth like that makes ordinary speech, eating, resting, and facial movement agonizing. And I personally do not think he would really need to do all that either, considering he's not even human. I'm sure being a Cenobite has changed his body in such a way that all of these actions are nothing but redundant for him. Another fun fact about his character, Nicholas Vince, the actor who played Chatterer, actually had a really tough time eating and even constantly drooled because of all the makeup and everything. And it ended up making his character look even more genuine and terrifying. Why does Chatterer click his teeth instead of speaking? By now, I'm sure you guys have realized that Chatterer gets his name because of the chattering of his teeth. Well, in the original film, his character is essentially mute, and unlike Pinhead, Chatterer never really explains his philosophy, threatens victims, nor does he deliver any speeches, because he simply cannot. The only thing he can use as a voice, that has literally turned into his identity now, is the sound of his teeth chattering. Now, when do people usually chatter their teeth? That's right, when they are either cold, in shock, afraid of something, or when their nervous system is in extreme distress. And it is a sound we can all recognize pretty easily because it's something we all have experienced at a certain point in our lives. Chatterer takes that familiar sound and turns it into something alien by stripping away its entire context. The way his teeth chatter, it's steady, unnatural, and literally impossible to read correctly. The best part is that we have no friggin' clue if he's excited, angry, or even hungry, because the film never offers the audience an answer for that. For me, in certain aspects, Chatterer is much scarier than Pinhead. You see, Pinhead can communicate. Oh sure, he threatens people and gives a lot of orders, but the thing is, you can understand him. You have a chance at bargaining with him, and if you follow his orders, chances are he will be more lenient with you. But Chatterer? What makes him so terrifying is that there is no way to understand what he means to convey. There is always going to be a sense of dread, because what if he gets pissed off trying to tell you something over and over and decides that you are just not worth his time? Of course, some of the expanded materials actually give later versions of Chatterer actual dialogue, but the classic Chatterer works so much better precisely because he never speaks. Like, at all. Silence, filled only by that clicking, is the whole point. Can Chatterer see through those sealed eyes? In the original movie, another thing that really baffles me is the fact that because of his entire facial structure, his vision seems to be blocked, but the film never really explains how he can perceive people or even navigate around them without just straight up running into them. His eyes are buried under scar tissue, so making eye contact is something you could never expect to do with him. That absence makes him so much more unnerving because we really cannot tell whether he sees his victim, hears them, senses them in some other way, or simply knows where they are as part of what being a Cenobite means. There is no scene that clears this up, and that ambiguity is doing some real work. At one point, I even thought that he used the chattering of his teeth like echolocation, and honestly, that doesn't seem that far-fetched to be a proper theory. During the production of the film, Vince actually could not see anything after his entire makeup and masking up was done. Although it looked exactly like he envisioned, this minor aspect made it really tough for him to act properly, both mentally and physically. So in Hellbound Hellraiser 2, the makeup was changed after he suffered a jaw injury, and more of the eyes, ears, and nose became visible so he could perform safely. So for all the people who were about to comment down below, "Oh, I remember him having eyes and being able to see," you are wrong. Please, still comment that, because it helps with the engagement. But in reality, this change was made so that the actor could do his job properly without any major issues. Coming back to the whole seeing topic, you could speculate that he had the powers of telepathy or some kind of pain vision, but it would not be fair for us to use these to fill that gap. And after all, the uncertainty of this character and the ambiguity he leaves in our minds is what brings the true horror out of this character. Was Chatterer once a child? Okay, I know this topic is going to throw you off, but honestly, I think this part is really important because Chatterer is such a character whose origins change depending on the version we're talking about. According to Hellbound Hellraiser 2, Chatterer is killed by the Cenobite, and to everyone's surprise, he reverts to the form of a teenage boy. This is the strongest evidence the films actually give us that directly points to the fact that Chatterer was transformed while still young. As the lore slowly expands, we get to know that his actual human name is Jim. Of course, this part was a big mystery for a long time, and the original film did not hint at this at all. In fact, the first movie literally gave zero information about his character or his backstory. Now, you might be wondering why this minor detail matters so much in an anatomy video. Well, once, we, the viewers, know a young person may exist beneath a monster. His smaller frame, hidden eyes, and ruined mouth become harder to look at in a different way. At first, we just thought he was a young guy who had been selected for a ritual. At least, we speculated that. But when we realized that he was just a young kid who was most probably forced to turn into an abomination, the horror just becomes much more personal and disgusting, fitting the character completely. Does Chatterer still feel pain like a human? Yet another thing the franchise never really clearly answers, and that is because the answer itself keeps on shifting due to the different rules that are applied differently across films, comics, and later continuities. But, Hellraiser's rule stays constant. Cenobites are such beings that have crossed the boundary that separates pain from pleasure. Every single one of them has some sort of injury or their body is totally mutilated, but none of them show a hint of pain. Chatterer's body is not unique in this sense because even his body looks like it is permanently locked at a level of suffering no normal person could endure for more than a few seconds, let alone survive indefinitely. His entire physical design suggests that his wounds are no longer injuries waiting to heal. Instead, they've become part of what he simply is now, and they have been built into his body rather than inflicted on it. Most people tend to exaggerate the Cenobites, but it's really important to be accurate as well. Cenobites are extremely powerful, and they can be a pain in the butt to destroy, as we have seen in almost every version. But their health bar goes down. It moves, and we all know that if a thing can be hurt, it can be killed, and Cenobites are no exception to this rule. They're not invulnerable, or even close to being immortal. The biggest proof of this is Chatterer himself, because he was killed in Hellbound Hellraiser 2 by the Cenobite. This means that there is a small chance that he still feels pain, but his pain threshold is so far up that most things capable of killing a human are nothing more than a small tickle for him. This very limit is, of course, unknown, but the films don't shy away from hinting at it nevertheless. How does Leviathan turn Chatterer's identity into a cruel joke? I'll be honest. This section is much more of an interpretation rather than confirmed dialogue that has been said in any version. But it is nevertheless important when it comes to his anatomy. Chatterer can be read as a Cenobite who was built specifically around the destruction of communication and physical expression. A smile that should hint at joy becomes a torn open mouth. A voice that is used to convey love becomes clicking teeth. Eyes that express the most out of anything on a person's face become hidden scars. A human face, the single most expressive part of the body, becomes something that cannot be used to comfort, speak, or be understood by anyone standing near it. This aspect becomes worse when you consider that he was just a child when he had to go through all that. We also know that their appearances are directly linked with their previous lives, because Pinhead's ordered grid of pins make him look like a ritual authority, someone who imposed structure on himself, while Chenard, a doctor obsessed with forbidden knowledge, becomes a grotesque surgical creature built from his own obsession. That is why Chatterer most likely might have been a kid who just wanted to be understood, but he was turned into a creature for whom any sort of communication was literally impossible. There is literally no bigger irony than this, and he might just have the saddest story of them all, because the rest were adults who mostly willingly did the ritual. But the chances are that Chatterer was just a kid who was forced to do this ritual, and then turned into a creature as grotesque as him. Why has Chatterer's design survived so many Hellraiser versions? The original 1987 Chatterer remains the most iconic of them all because his entire design is so simple while being readable and instantly disturbing. The exposed teeth, the hidden eyes, and the clicking sound all tell the audience everything they need to know before he does anything literally at all. There is zero need for any sort of backstory or dialogue to make him work in a scene. Just one look at him is all it takes. The thing I love about Chatterer, and I really appreciate from the people who went on with his later versions, is that they did not aim to replace any of his character traits. Instead, they decided to build around him in such a way that the more they expanded, the deeper the character felt. Of course, there were a few changes, like Hellbound 2 altered the design to reveal more facial features, partly to accommodate the practical performance needs after Nicholas Vince's injury, and later on in a few stories, they even decided to introduce Cenobites who were related to Chatterer, or were like him. But all of these changes or additions were just variations of the same character, so I don't think that they need a separate rundown if I'm being honest. The 2022 movie was probably the first one that reimagined Chatterer as a character who used his own flesh as a costume, and this philosophy was for sure really creative and new, and a costume made of your own skin sounds eerily similar like something the Leviathan would make someone do. The only issue that the makeup artists had with this new look was the fact that they purposefully had to scale back a little bit because after a certain point, Chatterer was starting to look like a different creature rather than an actual Cenobite. That detail matters because it points to the same rule that has held since 1987. Chatterer only works when he remains recognizably human underneath the horror. Chatterer is the type of creature that the creators put in, not just as a horror element, but as a clear example of the circumstances of said horror. Remember the movies where there was always this one person who would get consumed by a curse or a spirit instead of getting killed by it? Chatterer is literally like that, except for the fact that his story is much more personal and tragic the more we get to learn about him. Many would even sympathize with him, but the kid inside him might be long gone. He just might be the most unfortunate character in this franchise, and the only person who can fix him relishes in his suffering. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button, smash the subscribe button, and ring the bell icon so that you never miss another update from our channel. And please comment down below which character's anatomy we should discuss next. Till we meet again in our next video,